Hello, my paper peeps. Welcome to another monthly method. Today I'll be showing you how to create a DIY vintage photo design for scrapbook journaling using 8 different methods. These techniques will show you how to age and mature those recent photos to give them that vintage vibe we all love and adore. So stay tuned and let's get crafting. Now, the first technique I'm going to show you is pretty much how to change your colored photos into something that looks a little bit more vintage. And I know most people know how to do this on their computers, but I'm just going to go through it very quickly here, a simple method that I use to make my photos look vintage without a lot of editing. I'm not really into photo editing. I'm more into scrapbook journaling. So this is really simple. And I think that a lot of you will just appreciate how easy it really is. So let's get started. Firstly, I'm actually working off of a Mac that uses the Apple Photos application software. So the first thing you want to do is simply take your photo, and as you can see here, I go right off on the right hand bar here. I will just click on the black and white tool. And I won't mess around too much with the warmth of the actual photo because you can actually change that later. And then the next thing I do is I go down to the vignette section here, and this gives the photo that really aged look by darkening the edges. What I usually do is just go to the strength button and I just pull that all the way to the right. I don't really mess around with the radius or the softness of the photo. You can, but if you're editing 10, 20 photos, you really want to keep it simple. So I don't mess around with that. The next thing that I do is I go to the filter section. And this is where you can really choose the hue of the actual photo itself. I usually keep it on the original filter, but as you can see, as I go down to vivid warm, vivid cool, dramatic warm, dramatic cool, you can really choose any of these and it would still give you that vintage effect. Now, one of the things I like to do is I like to print out 2.5 by 2.5 inch photos. And the reason why I do that is I don't like to waste photo paper, and I find this size is perfect. You can fit 12 of this size photo onto one 8.5 by 11 photo paper. And if you're using smaller journals like 5.5 by 7 or 7 by 9 inch journals, these are perfect sizes for those journals. Now, I'm just going to give you an example of, say, this photo here. Now, this is actually a photo of the modern pour. I'm a big wax seal girl, so I actually did a video on a wax seal modern pour, and this was the photo from that. If you're actually interested in how I created these, I'll leave the link at the end of this video that will show you how I created these really cool wax seals. But for now, I just want to go through the whole process one more time, just so that you get it. I just click on the black and white button to give it that black and white effect. Then I go down to vignette, pull that strength button, slide it all the way to the right so that you soften those edges. Again, I don't mess with intensity edges or anything like that. And then right away, I go to the filters, and then I kind of scroll down to see what would look best with this photo. Really, if you actually look at all the vintage photos out there, they take on so many different hues, and the filters in the Mac photo application is good for that. So here are the photos that I've printed out, and you'll notice not all of them are black and whited out. And the reason why I did that is because I want to show you how you can take your color photos and make them look vintage without having to change the color. Because in some of my albums, I really like retaining the color of my photos. And so I'm going to show you how you can make them still look vintage without changing the actual color of them. Now, if you're interested, this is actually the journal that we're in right now. It's called the Sage Collection, and it's a compilation of videos that I've created that will showcase how to set up your scrapbook journal for the year. There's stamping videos, ephemera, tutorial videos, how to create tags, and all those things. I will put them in the link at the end of this video. So if you're interested in how I set up a scrapbook journal, you can access those then, or I'll put some in the description box below as well. Now these photos, 2.5 by 2.5 inches, work perfectly in this journal here. And if you want to do a DIY journal, I have the link to the download for this journal in the description box below. And this is actually perfect for showcasing this size of photo. So if you're interested in that, then head down to the description box. In this paper line, I have added some vintage frames that are perfectly set up to accommodate that 2.5 by 2.5 inch photo that I've printed out. So here is the second technique on how to make your photos look vintage. Now, as you can see here, how perfectly fits into that frame. There's a bit of a border around there, or a mat around it. Now, that's not the actual vintage part that I want to talk about. It's the actual frame around it where it's ripped. This is one way to create a vintage look. Now, all you do is you take that photo frame, and what I did was I ripped it towards me. It exposes this white edge. And all you want to do is take your distress ink, in this case it's the frayed burlap, to ink up those edges to give it a more aged look. And see how simple that is? The third technique that I want to show you is the use of tea or coffee dyed paper. I actually dyed this paper myself, and it's leftovers from another project that I did, but I really like the edges of it, and even though there's text on it, we'll be covering that up. So all I do is I take my photo, and you can see here I did not black and white this photo, but I'm going to show you how you can actually meld those colors together, because right now you have this tea dyed edge and then it's black and white. All you do again is take your distress ink, in this case the frayed burlap that I'm using, and I just not only ink the tea-dyed edges, but I also drag that ink right onto the photo to give it more of that cohesive look, like they actually belong together. Now the fourth technique is really simply taking one of these photos and then leaving 1/8 of an inch white border around each photo. I can remember back when I was looking at some of my parents' photos, and most of them look like this, where it's just a white border around a black and white photo. So that in itself is quite simple. The fifth technique I'm going to show you. Again, you can see here I did not change the color of this photo. But all I'm going to do is take a roughening tool like this Tim Holtz one, and I'm just going to roughen up the edges to give it that jagged look, like it's been handled a lot. And then I take my frayed burlap and ink the edges. And you see how I drag it right onto the photo to make sure that those edges blend in with the photo itself. So that's the fifth technique. Now the sixth technique is one of my all-time favorites, and that is taking just sandpaper. I stole this from my husband's toolbox, and all I do is I roughen up the image itself, and I try to make a bit of a box around the image, just like that. And you can leave it like this, or you can ink it up as well. Do you see how it gives it that aged look? Again, one of my favorite techniques to use. Now, There's another technique which is quite similar, but this case here with this other photo, I did not leave a white border, but I created a white border. So what you do is you just take a photo, make sure that there's no white border around it. So cut it right to the edge of the photo, and then you take your sandpaper and you sand away the edge to give it a really, really neat aged look. So that's my 7th technique. Now the 8th technique I want to talk to you about is how do you take a photo that you've printed off of, say, one of these inkless printers like the Instax, and how do you turn it into a vintage photo? Now the Instax is great because you can actually black and white your photos, but how do you actually turn that white border into something that looks more aged or mature? And again, really simple, just your frayed burlap or any other distress ink color that might match your album, and you just ink that up. I also like to add another element to this, and that's usually stamping them. I don't know if you could say that that is vintage. Again, it's a little bit of a modern element that I like to add to my vintage albums or to my vintage photos. If you're going to stamp a photo from your Instax, the best thing to do is use this VersaFine ink. I think it gives the most detailed print, and I just really like it on these photos. Now, a bit of caution here, you gotta let it dry. Unless you want to mature the photo a little bit more, then you can actually smudge the text on it. In this case here, I didn't want to do that, but I did drag it along the ink pad so it could give it more brownish edges. But here is the finished products of 8 different techniques on how to make your photos vintage. I really hope you liked this video. I hope to see you in my next videos. And if you're interested in scrapbook journaling and setting up your scrapbook journals, then make sure that you click on any of these videos at the end of this video, and we'll see you there. So take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.